Hey, everybody. It's your buddy Pete. Welcome to the Break It Down Show. I got Tony coming in here in a second. Just thought I'd vamp a little bit and catch up. I just had surgery on my ankle the other day and I had it rebuilt. So I am sort of limping around on limited power because I had a long laundry list of things wrong with my left ankle. So it's in a cast. It's a little bit sore. So you might see me moving around a little bit. But that's not what I'm talking to right now. Right now, I'm just talking to check in and say, hey, how y'all doing? Hope everything's going good. You can always reach me at pete@breakitdownshow.com. You can also talk to me about the Ground Truth Center, which I haven't talked about a whole lot here on this show, but I figured I'd take this second to talk about the Ground Truth Center. It's a mechanism that I wanted to build to take practitioners like me, like Tony, who's going to be on the show, and shrink the gap between the practitioner and the academic and the diplomat and the legislator, so that the good idea that briefs well in practice is related to what the practitioner would have to do. A good example is uh, Allison. So Allison was Nellie Olson on Little House on the Prairie. She was big during the full bloom of the AIDS epidemic and going out in and around Hollywood and trying to work on getting a hold of the AIDS epidemic and how do we do this? The advice was like, hey, quit doing things that give you AIDS. But the reality is when you're out case managing and you're out trying to work, you've got to establish things like trust. And there's like these smaller little things that actually move the needle. So there's the big goal, but then the practitioner on the ground is like, how do I accomplish this thing? And the reality, the ground truth is often different and unknowable to the person who's up in what I call the spaceship. So if you're up at echelons like at Congress or you're at Harvard and you're nowhere near the ground level, you'll come to these conclusions that are just not accurate. And so how do you fix it? Well, the Ground Truth Center, groundtruthcenter.org is what we're trying to do. And if we're able to get our way, we will start to be able to help influence before decisions are made, before money is spent, start to shrink that gap and inform these decisions so that when we make priorities, when we think about what we want to pay for, like I'm pretty hard on sergeant majors. When I talk about working overseas, they always want to start the NCO Academy, and that's a good thing if you're a sergeant major in America, but it doesn't necessarily relate to skills. So Ground Truth Center is looking to try to shrink that gap from practitioner to the academic to the legislator who's trying to create the outcome of stability in fill in the country X. So that's what we do at the Ground Truth Center. I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. Love to hear if you have an idea on like where you might be able to contribute to that. Because look, we just used an example of AIDS in West Hollywood, and then we used an example of sergeant majors in Iraq. And these are different things, but the same thing applies. That upper level decision making when you have something that briefs well, hey, we're going to empower X. And then you say, hey, Pete, go do this job. And you're like, how on earth does that relate to what's going on here? That's the Ground Truth Center. All right, I got Tony here. Let me bring my man in. And these are different things, but the same thing applies. That upper level decision making when you have something
hey guys
going on here. Empower X. And then you say, hey, Pete, go do this job.
Yeah, hold on a second. I'm trying to fix it. I have no idea what's going on. Hold on.
Speakers are on somewhere.
There we go. There, I got it fixed. There.
Nice.
Hey, Pete, how are you?
I'm going to point. I'm good. I'm going to point at you, and you're going to say, "This is Tony Shaffer," and you're watching the Break It Down show. Ready?
Okay.
Do it. Now you say, "This is Tony Shaffer," and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Oh, hey, this is Tony Shaffer, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Oh, voila. I love it. Hey, man, thanks for coming on the show. We get to meet the most amazing people. Yeah, Tony has his own show, and we're going to talk all kinds of stuff. Maybe we'll get into espionage type things. Maybe we'll get into something else. I don't know, because there's too much experience between the two of us where we may not even get there. But one of the things that I think about, so just for everybody watching, he and I are both counterintelligence agents. And at some point here in the near future, if I have any more counterintelligence conversations with other agents, I'll have the most on the internet because I've done so many of them. We don't normally talk. We don't have a beret. We don't have a badge. We don't typically like to talk for whatever reason, even when we're post-career. You have written a book. You talk about what you did. I have parts of a book, and I've talked a lot about over the thousands and thousands of episodes I've done about our job. Are we doing ourselves a disservice as as a job. Even like when you and I talk, we have to talk all around each other so that we can figure out, like, is Tony any good? Is Pete any good? And so it's really hard for us to communicate internally, forget about externally to the military, because they have no idea what to do with us. Do we need to do a better job of this?
Well, Pete, I appreciate being on your show. And I think that the two issues you and I face is the fact that the system that created us hates what we do. And let me explain that. You have a system of people who don't like being told that they're wrong or they're stupid, right? And inherently, what we do is go out and say, you're not as smart as you think you are, and these are the things you consider. And so either you have a strong backbone like you and I, and you endure it and you continue and you go through, or you comply and become essentially not effective as an intelligence officer, and they put you in the corner and they put you on a staff, and basically you become part of the furniture. That's what happens. Either you do extraordinarily well, or you become part of the office furniture and you're a laughing stock. And that's what my experience has said. And so, whenever you're designed to be different and you do that job, there are consequences to doing your job. And we've talked about this both on air and off air. And then the consequences of being wrong often is that people die. And so that's why we make it a point to try to be very correct. And the other thing is being ignored. Obviously, part of my book, Operation Darkheart, was about the fact that I was on a small team called Operation Able Danger by SOCOM, that was focused on detecting Al-Qaeda before anybody knew it was a global threat. And of course, we got it right, but we were ignored because, it went against the political leanings of the Clinton administration and the Bush administration. So even when you're right, people may ignore you because it does not reinforce their aspirations. And I've said that that's another danger. So you're in other words, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But still, people like Pete and I sign up to do it. And the second thing, and I think probably more to the point of what we do here, or what we're talking about, is the skill set you develop being in this field. I don't know how much time, if any, you spend undercover. I spent a lot of time undercover. I was in career cover for most of my career, both on the counterintelligence side and on the offensive on the FI side, foreign intelligence side. But you basically have to understand at a deeper level the nature of human beings. And that means both in operations when you're in the field, dealing with tribes and individuals like you had to do in Afghanistan and other places, as well as understanding the psychology of the people above you. So it's quite the order, quite a challenge, and something that we have to face and endure as operatives within the counterintelligence and foreign intelligence field.
Boy, we could wind that back. I say that quite often, and have that entire beginning again and say none of the same things and have all of that be true. There are people in our discipline. So one of my friends, his name is Ray Duggan. Maybe you know Ray, maybe you don't. Counterintelligence. Yeah. He's like, Pete, we counted one day, and there are over 130 sub-disciplines within counterintelligence. And I know that doesn't surprise you because you might do. So just for people watching, your job might be for your entire career, if you somehow got lucky, because you couldn't just walk into this job, debriefing people who come in from the cold from somewhere else. So like, let's say an East German agent's like, you know what, I'm coming over. Someone has got to talk to that person. And that's a specialty. So not my job, it's not Tony's job, but we would be qualified by the title of our job to go and learn that job. And then you got dudes that travel their entire lives, and they either in place or they look for in place listening devices. Again, not in any way the jobs that we did.
Right.
So it's a multifaceted field. So I want to get to the social and the big picture part of this. We don't have a trident, right? We don't have a long tab. So we don't have a bona fides when we show up.
Yeah, I guess we don't. We do, but we don't. I mean, look, I've got photostats of my credentials, which I got when I was a very young special agent, and I did have a badge, and I do have a badge because of stuff I do for law enforcement now. But I know what you're saying. There's nothing you wear in your uniform necessarily that distinguishes you as a member of the field, even though it's very it's not an easy field to be in. I don't think people understand this. Maybe you can help clarify this. Like you just said, you have a range of things, everything from technical countermeasures. You mentioned technical countermeasures. You mentioned the Formica, the debriefing and
Right.
briefing of individuals. I went through the strategic debriefing course, SDC, which was a great course that teaches you a great number of things of how to actually deal with people who are not necessarily hostile, but you've got to learn how to listen, how to
Right.
ask questions properly, all that stuff. And so to that point, I mean, we have a range of things you could be going to. You have CI guys to support the polygraph guys, which I don't believe in polygraphs, just saying. But there's a whole range of folks. Another thing I didn't even mention to you is when in Afghanistan, I was the guy in charge of all the DIA, Defense Intelligence Polygraph agents and activities. They fell under me, and I would have to dispatch people to go do that. And that was, by the way, a counterintelligence role that was just essentially assigned to me as part of the overall clandestine operational profile in Afghanistan. So these are all things that we have to do on a routine basis, which again is not easy. And then the other thing, when you go to the farm, which is up there, I have it a little bit up higher than you guys can't see it right now, but it's up there. My license to steal. Again, you don't get anything other than the piece of paper that says you can go lie, cheat, and steal for the United States. That's it. So.
And even though we are badged and credentialed federal agents, a lot of us aren't allowed to hold those badges or credentials because they're like, "Oh, hold on."
They get upset every time I kept mine. It's like, "Well, I'm going to keep mine." Oh, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and legitimately so, because our job, by its nature, is risky, and you're putting a lot of trust and not even trust. There's a lot of things that can go wrong by someone who's out and like, "Hey, I'm an agent, I'm a U.S. federal agent," right? And you're like, "Well, kind of. Don't say that." You're like, "But it's true."
It depends. Yeah, it depends.
Right.
So but this is my issue with the profession because, the more you tell people that, the more I think you bring it upon yourself. I'm a believer in being adults. Like when I train for weapons, if you're in weapons training with me, Pete, you're wearing the weapon loaded the entire time. You're not coming up to the range, putting a round in. No, I'm a believer that you train as you fight as you're trained. So therefore, if you're going to be in combat and the weapon's going to be loaded, you train with the weapon being loaded. And I think, my experience with counterintelligence as well. It's like, I went through Fort Huachuca, I went through the agent course, and I'd already been out doing things, which is one of those grand ironies. I was recruited early on, and I was deployed doing counterintelligence and counterterrorism stuff long before I became a badged agent because, and so I came in with certain skills already, and the standard of teaching was lower than what I had already been having to do in the field. So it's kind of like, okay, this is bizarre. So I think we need to basically require that we do give people the benefit of the doubt and treat them like adults. So if you're going to be essentially have the authority of a special agent, you need to be treated as a special agent. If you fail on that, then you lose your badge or credentials and you go back to another field. So
one of the side effects that's bad for the badge or credentialed CI agents not having their badges and credentials all the time is that it is, and I don't have any proof of this, but from my own experience directly has proven to be true, it is the least recognized, most widely laughed at badge when you pull it out. I don't know of anybody else in the law enforcement kind of world who pulls out a badge and is like, "Hey, I've got this badge and you're enjoined, which is required legally to help me accomplish this mission." The person's like, "What is that? What is that thing? Is that a real badge?" That's what happens. Like people are like, "Well, I'm not going to do that," and you're like, "But you can't." And now what am I going to do? Arrest this person? And so it is because of how we've treated it, it has basically devalued the badge to the point where my response was, I'm going to keep this thing in my pocket and never use it, because the second I pull it out, I've put myself into a box that I don't have a way out of.
So it depends on how. I had good experience because the basically, if it's some of its bedside manner, it's how you present it. Because I had to do a lot of things, moving things through customs. So one of the things I used to do was, and I think you may be familiar with this, foreign material acquisition, FMA. Sure. So for the audience to understand, the U.S. government, I have to be careful here because a lot of this is still highly classified. Suffice it to say, the U.S. government invests in purchasing without acknowledging it's purchased foreign material, foreign weapons systems. So I used to have to move the stuff through customs, and I dealt with U.S. Customs before they were DHS. And so I got to tell you, Pete, I had a great relationship with those guys because as a guy who was both a special agent in the Army and an FI guy and so as a civilian, I could go back and forth. I could use both authorities at different times, which was I found very convenient because you're better off going as a federal agent to U.S. Customs to say, I need to have you cooperate as I move this T-72. We may have moved this T-72 through customs, maybe. I don't know, maybe. I'm just thinking maybe it happened. I don't know. And so when you do that, it's better to be a credentialed special agent rather than the guy who is actually undercover, which I've had to do as a gray arms guy pretending to be a business guy. So there's a difference there. And so it's good to have both flavors, but I think a lot of it has to do with how you're taught to use it. I think the Army does not teach people properly how to use the authorities that they're giving within Title 18 and Title 10.
Yeah, no, you're right about all of that. And of course, like how the organizations you're working with, how much of a surprise this badge is, and everything else. The training on it is very limited. And again, this risk, the fear. So there is to everybody else's credit, we are dangerous. So part of our job legally requires us to drink. And that means that you're going to be drunk while working. And that means that if you have 100 agents out drinking while working over 100 days, someone, either through goofiness, bad luck, or just the nature of that combination of things, they're going to make a mistake that is painful for a commander. And commanders aren't taught how to deal with that, right? And so I don't want to justify bad behavior, but you're asking people to go to a place and drink enough to do a job, and that's just a recipe for things to have happen. It's just like if you kick people out of the back of an airplane attached to a static line, some number of them are going to snap their femurs. It's just going to happen, right? And so when you put agents out into the field and say, I need you to go risk everything, I need you to get drunk when you do it and everything else, and we don't know how to deal with that.
So the career field and many folks are risk adverse is, I think, the term that would be best to summarize what you're talking about. Yeah, that people are. And I obviously have never been in that category, and I frighten people by the fact I just don't care. It's like, I'm not right. We're going to go out and do what's necessary, and there's going to be things that go wrong, and you manage those things. And because of that, but because there is a zero defect mentality in the Army today, and I saw it a little bit when I was coming through. I mean, I didn't have it as much as others did, but it does exist, and you do have people who actually believe that any fault at all is something that they can't tolerate as part of the landscape of mission accomplishment. And I mean, I'll just say it. When I went to the farm, when we were at Camp Perry, you drank during exercises because in the real world you drink, and when you're out doing things, and they would actually be serving you drinks. This is a military exercise in a bar on a military facility, and part of the training is learning how to drink and not lose your wits so you can accomplish operational things. And that's completely accurate. And if people in the field, I think, generally understand it, and that if you come up and you go through the training and you're successful, but the problem is this, and this, Pete, often we're placed under elements of MI that don't understand what we do. The regular, the tactical guys have no clue, or the strategic guys who have no operational experience. It's all academics, and so they're the ones that freak out. And then sometimes, as a military, as a special agent, you're placed in other elements of the Army. I've worked with CID. That's a trip, and worked with other folks who were basically politicians in uniform who don't like the idea of exposing anything to risk, and it's very difficult. And so you make those people very nervous about your authorities, about what you have to do, and about the potential things going sideways. And look, I've been called in and chewed out big time by general officers, and it's like, dude, it's my job. Sorry. And I don't mean to be disruptive, but I am. And our we are a product of the system, and that's why I opened it up with, Pete. I said, we are produced by a system that hates us. So
it's so true. I've been kicked off a lot of camps. Colonels have spun up their personal security details to get me off of their camp. And I was there to help them. I really am on their side, right? But they hate us. And until I learned enough about us to keep myself, I'm not trying to be a maverick, but the nature of our job makes me a maverick,
It
and
does.
I have bad news, as you said earlier. And so you piss off colonels, and colonels stamp their feet and they say, I want this guy off this camp. And unless you got a boss with a big ass that can get chewed on, Pete gets kicked off a camp. That's what happens all the time. And then they don't ever have to apologize. Officers are all about, you have to apologize. I'm like, well, then where's my apology? Like, you know what? Let's not worry about that. And I'm like, now here's what happens. You, S3, G3, whatever operations person who's got a upward trajectory, on their career, you're now a coward because you won't go approach that 06 and go, hey, you need to, you chastise Pete publicly. Now you're going to have to stand up. And we shouldn't have to tell you this because you're a fucking colonel, but they don't. And so that's that whole thing. We're like, look, let it go and all that, but I'm still going to go give you bad news. And I'm not going to take it personal against that 06, but understand he's going to get more bad news because they're failing.
Right. And so on that very point, I think big army, which has a lot of equities. Big army is just like a big corporation. It is like, I always tell people, it's like the army is just like any other corporation. You got the people who are being groomed to be the guys at the top. You got folks who are that really good at their job and they like being down in the weeds. You got others. And General Scanlon, was commander of INSCOM, was once asked. He said, the reporter said, "How many people work at INSCOM, at Intelligence Security Command?" He looks up and says, "Oh, I don't know, about half." And he was quite serious, I'm sure. So that's the thing. It's like it's a corporation, and then so the folks I have found the most success in working with, because they too are an anomaly to the system, are the special operations guys, both white world and black world. And because they do understand risk, and some of my best operations people have been either in support of or conjoined with special operations. And you'll find people who read Dark Heart, I was most of the time I just was with the special operations guys because we understood each other. It's like, we're out to do risky things. And I found that they to be kindred spirits and operators. And this is the other thing too. I would go down to Fort Bragg to different entities that I don't want to mention by name because I'll probably get in trouble still. But I would show up at these entities and I'd be stuck in the operations directorate. It's like, oh, you should be in the intel director. It's like, no, I'm an operator. I should be working with the operators.
Right.
And people don't generally understand it. It's like, I don't know. I'm not the guy that sits behind the desk. I'm the guy outside the wire with the other guys outside the wire. So
absolutely. When there's so many of these stories, but I want to go back and get into this whole thing of our job is dangerous and it requires us to do dangerous things. And not all of us are good at it, right? That's the other thing is internally, how do we look? I don't have to check your bona fides because I've heard you talk and I'm like, Tony's done things. Tony doesn't have to check mine because he's heard me talk. And there's no bullshit there, right? Like I'm not doing like, don't take my picture. I'm so secret. You can't take my picture. I can't go to Cuba. No. That's all. Like those kind of folks, they have a very specific role in our field, but they don't stand out as being excellent. And not everybody gets to be excellent. Half of us are below average, all those kinds of things. So I'm working on doing a little bit of moonlighting while I'm on a federal job as a contractor because I've got some dwell time back at home to do. So I come out and I'm doing a counterintelligence support operation, and I'm hemmed up. I'm like, oh man, there's no machine here for me to push my machine button every day. I'm an ops guy, and so I'm like, well, I know how to find work. So I go to all the different human elements, and that includes all of them. The CIA has their side, the spec ops guys have theirs, and this is Kona province. This is not a gentle place. And soon enough, and look, Tony, I got my pitch down. I'm like, hey, I'm Pete, not trying to cause trouble, trying to help. I'm glad to go on patrols. I write great reports, and I've got a lot of experience, blah, 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 blah. And then everybody's like, hey, you know what? Yeah, we probably will put you to work. Or, hey, you know what? We're getting ready to leave. Talk to the next team. They probably could, because we never have enough people. Anyhow, that part of the setup is going on. Meanwhile, there's a CI team, counterintelligence team running around, and they're doing interviews for employees on the camps who are Afghans, and they're doing like a go no go on do they get to stay employed with the Americans. And keep in mind, we're in Kona province, which for everybody is right by Pakistan. This is Taliban country.
Wild West.
These guys come back and tell me, hey, we're basically blanket requesting or recommending everybody for termination. And I look at the chief, by the way, he's the senior person on this team. He's a warrant officer. And I go, Chief, what are we doing here? You're recommending all these guys for termination? Like, well, it's just a recommendation. They don't have to do it. And I'm like, Chief, why aren't you flipping these guys? Why aren't you working them? Why aren't you bringing them on the camp?
Exactly.
And one of this adorable little baby E4 is like, we're on the side of a mountain and the mountain goes above us. And he's like, what if I find out where the fuel farm is? And I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. We've been here for 10 years. Do you think maybe they know already? Like, and so we have these people in our field that are bound by this institutionalized incapacity to do your job. Yeah, your fucking job is dangerous. Yes, you have to meet some Taliban people. And if you can recruit and flip Mullah Omar, that's your fucking job. And by the way,
Yeah.
when the CIA comes and takes that dude from you, that's awesome for you. That means you did a great job. You did something that they couldn't do, and they appreciate you. Keep doing those things. These guys got pissed at me because I'm like, you were firing people left and right in a counterinsurgency fight. What are these guys going to go do then if they can't make money? And these interpreters, Tony, interpreters. They were firing interpreters. So I just want that incapacity to get things right, to understand the fight. Man, it's horrible.
Yeah. So on the interpreter thing, that's one of the reasons I had all the CI, the polygraph guys over there with me, because there were indications that we had problems with them, which we did. But that's another story for another day. The other issue regarding the factions and vetting, look, Peter, if you can't figure out that they're all playing their own game, then you shouldn't be in the game, because they are. Are they going to be loyal? Well, yeah, kind of. Will they tell you everything that you want to know? Well, they may tell you what you want to know, but it may not be necessarily accurate. That's why you have vetting. That's why you have secondary and third sources. That's why you have NSA doing things to validate. I don't want to get into how they do the vetting, but we have vetting via NSA. Suffice it to say that even information that is somewhat, I don't want to say tainted. Tainted is not the right word. Shaded, perhaps. It is shaded by the perspective of a tribe is not a bad thing. It tells you what they want you to know, which is important. It doesn't necessarily tell you what the truth is, but it tells you what they want you to know, and that means something. And the idea that they're bad and we're going to terminate them, it's like, really? In this culture, everybody's bad. Everybody's killed their wives. So what? I mean, we're not here to deal with Boy Scouts. These people are Tony Soprano. Yes, they are. Accept that for what it is. Not project your cultural values on a region that has not had civilized thinking in its entire existence. Give it up. And it's that,
quite often, no electricity.
Yeah, it's like, how do you guys not understand that these people are not us? They don't understand things like us, nor will they ever accept things like us. You need to go to their level of understanding. They're not going to come to ours. And it's been very frustrating to watch. And I criticize it in Dark Heart. It's like, what's wrong with you people? You need to understand the culture. They do not think like us. You need to understand how they think and use it to our advantage, not pretend, they're not going to actually tell us the truth. They're not. That's why they pay us the big bucks to be intelligence officers to figure it out, and you go do what you're supposed to do. So
when people say things like that to me, because they say them all the time, and they'll say like, well, they're not going to tell us the truth. I'm like, no, they're not going to tell you the truth. Yeah, I'm going to build trust with them because I dig who they are, and I'm going to. Exactly. And one of the things, look, I didn't start out this way. I had to develop. I'm curious when you felt like you got to your different rungs of how good you are, because most people I talk to are like, are you a good agent, humenter, or collector in general? They're like, yeah, of course I'm good. I'm like, how long did it take you to get there? About 36 months. How many months were you deployed? About 36 months. And I'm like, okay, well, so could it be that if you had twice as much deployment time, you'd be a lot better? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, so what happens when someone's had 1,000 patrols and has been out for years? Are they better than you? And they're like, well, I don't know about that. And I'm like, okay. So we have this weird problem with assessing ourselves, because it is hard, and we all have our own hocus pocus, our own judo that we do. Yeah. But I promise, if you and I go on patrol, you and I don't have to go on the same patrol anymore, because you know that my judo works and I know that yours works. And so if I'm going, it's to support you, or vice versa, right? We don't need to overlap. I watched that team go out. I think about that poor commander who's got his CI team. You have a whole fucking team, and they aren't giving you sources and information you can't get from anywhere else. Like those guys are not operationally functional. Send them home. I'll guarantee it right now. And I know you'll say the same thing. I'll outproduce that entire team. I need 6 weeks to build my network. If you let me stay 18 months, man, you were going to get so much good stuff that you can't get from anywhere else. I'm going to reduce the threat in the area. I'm going to increase your ability to win. I'm going to calm things down by myself. I'm just going to outwork all three of these guys who right now are doing the opposite of all those things.
So, well, my experience, the way I knew when I knew was because I got thrown into the middle of things before I was an agent. I literally was commissioned in '83. I didn't even have a degree yet. I was actually in college still, and I was recruited into a special program called Key Personnel Upgrade Program, Keep Up. And basically, what it was, Pete, was taking to find people with talent. I guess I did have talent because I got recruited.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, I'm in the middle of operations, literally. So it was like literally being thrown into the fire. And I don't want to get into it because it's still classified, but I had to do some things undercover in Germany, which turned out to be the right thing. And so when that happened, next thing you know, I got a medal. It's like, gee, I thought I was going to get fired for that. And I got a medal. No, I am dead serious. But we'll talk about it offline sometime. But it was like, really? I did the right thing? Okay. And so next thing you know, I'm sent to New York City as part of the 902nd to be part of a classified operation there for Op Sale 86. And then I'm basically rewarded by more and more extensive and higher level assignments. Does that make sense? It's kind of like
Yep.
Based on observations of others, I kept getting pushed into other things. And so next thing I know, I'm in the middle of, all this stuff. I'm doing, flying off in the middle. I'm working for the Air Force as a civilian, but flying off because the Army needs me in Germany for something over the weekend. But by the way, the Air Force still didn't know about that. Just saying. No, I'm serious. Like, yeah, you got to go. We need to put you on an airplane. You have to be in Berlin for this. Okay. So it was more about getting thrown into things, being essentially given the freedom to fail, I guess is the best way of putting it. Any one of those things could have gone really bad. And, one success led to another. And I guess, I kept getting pushed into more and more things until I'm the guy running the teams. And that's how it kind of happened. By '89, I was running teams against the Russians. I wrote part of it in the book. We basically were observing the Russians coming here as part of the INF Treaty, the Intermediate Force Nuclear Missile Treaty, where basically we were dismantling the tactical nuclear weapons of both sides. And so the Russians were coming here to observe our firing off the Pershing 2 boosters in Texas. Well, the agreement was we wouldn't have intelligence operations. Of course, we did. And so I was part of the joint FBI Army counterintelligence team, which would monitor the Russians. My role was if one defected, I had a vehicle ready to go, put the Russian in it, take him to so it was a joint Army FBI foreign counterintelligence operation. And so it was things like that I kept getting more and more just, hey, we know you can do it, go do it. And so that's how I knew, because I didn't, as a matter of fact, what's funny about this, Pete, I was doing shit that I didn't even know was important. It's like, oh, I just would go do it. No, because it's like, it's like I took a step back one day. It's like, I just thought everybody was doing this stuff. It's like, oh, yeah, all counterintelligence guys do this. Like, no, I came out to come to find out, it's like, no, they don't all do this stuff. So, but it was kind of cool because I just kept getting pushed into stuff. So that's how I knew.
Yeah. There's a lot, again, there's so much richness in our conversation. I'm trying to illustrate some of the context that is you and I can know about, but that ability to recognize that talent, that really largely, at least from when I got in '94, that wasn't there at all. And there's indicators of these things, right? Like, I don't know what they are, but they picked me for, I did something.
Well, remember, I came in 20 years before you came in, just saying,
Right. And so I'm in Germany, and they picked me to go out to this dinner with the mayor of Darmstadt and all those other kind of things. Mayor of Darmstadt and I start talking, and he takes a liking to me. And he's like, do you like schnapps? Well, I'm a counterintelligence agent. So I say, yes, of course, I love schnapps. Yeah. And so he's like, we're going to go to my family distillery. And then the whole night was spent drinking. Instead of someone saying, hey, I don't know how Pete did this, but he met and befriended in minutes the mayor of Darmstadt. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we do something with him. Instead, and this is a thing, look, I'm athletic in our field. There are not a lot of athletic people.
I can tell you stories about that.
Everybody's smart, right? But yeah, I won on every board I sat in front of. I always got my my sergeant an excellent block for leadership because I was doing correspondence courses. I had a degree. I was someone that was begging to be led by somebody, and nobody knew how to lead me. I was just like this And like, well, if you're not going to lead me, I'm going to stay motivated. Like I would do a thing. It's the thing I would do too. Is like we do our PT test, right? Just for the audience, PT test is 2-mile run is one of the events. I'm a max PT guy. I'm in great shape. And so either you run out and you run back, or you run around the track a whole bunch of times. Whichever style we did, I would finish my time. I'd max my run, and then I would find someone and I would run across the field, or I'd run back on the course and grab them and run them in. I was told that was bad leadership. That was bad form to do that. And I'm like, and I didn't do it to people who didn't want me there. I didn't mess with them. But like people who, even with my friends or not, I'm like, yeah, it was great. Thanks for running. I'll run right in front of you. I'll run right behind you. I'll run next to you. I'll shut, whatever. But I did that in service to my fellow soldiers.
Yeah.
All of these things indicate someone that's like, hey, this guy wants to go do something. Let's saddle this stallion up and let's see what happens. But instead, no. Nope. Bad warrior. Don't do those things. And we do that all the time.
I know I've seen this too, and I didn't accept it.
Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
Before decisions to make, before money is spent.
I'll second. I'm just thinking. Hold on a second.
Shrink that gap and inform.
Sorry about that. Anyway, no, I've seen the same thing in my travels, and by the way, between you and me, I just don't care. It's you know, I was explaining this to someone. I don't care. I'm going to do what I think is best, and I could care less about what your opinion is, because first off, your opinion is based on something that is counterproductive. The idea of limiting people, the idea of not having the best out of a person is insane. And yeah, I've seen standards come and go. And again, when I went through, by the way, when I went through Fort Huachuca as a second lieutenant in 84 at the basic course, by the way, I was already in a counterintelligence slot in 84 when I went through the basic course, but we all had to go through as basic officers. I was a PT officer. I was a National Guard guy, believe it or not. And I was the guy running PT for the class. I didn't care. It's like, I'm just going to do this. We had a, can I tell the story? I guess I can. We had we were going through in 84. This is again 20 years, Pete, before you were in. So this is back in
I'm 94. 10 years. 10 years.
94. No, 10 years. I guess it was 10 years. 10 years. All right, 10 years. So 10 years before you come in. And I'm going through basic, and we got this guy, Major Dick. Well, and then I'm not joking. That's his name. It shows up as Captain Dick. Captain Dick is a one of those retreads. They were moving people out of over crowded branches. He was a artillery guy, and apparently he's still around, and he still hates me, which is a hint. Anyway, so Major Dick or Captain Dick shows up, and he's a dick. And so, you know, in PT, no, I'm serious. So in PT, the guy's running, and we used to have 3 groups. We had the fast group, medium group, and slow group at Fort Huachuca. Fort Huachuca is a mile up, so it's already tough.
Yeah.
And so I was always running with the fast group. And so Lisa, one of my lieutenant friends, was in the medium group, and no, she was in the fast group, and I had to run in the medium group because I had to basically anyway. Major Dick, Captain Dick would run, and he had bleeding hemorrhoids, and people would complain about it. It's like he's a Major Dick. So I'm just saying things like that. It's like people would get out there and insist that they're the fastest and that and the other, and they were not in shape, and yet we had to put up with that nonsense from stupid people like Major Dick. And I could tell you stories about him all day, but I won't. But I'm just saying that as a field, we get people in who really don't want to be strack. They don't want to have to carry and do the hard work that a lot of us want to do. And it really does water down the branch, and this especially we have within the branch. I'm not a big fan of the MI branch, just saying. So.
No, I'm with you. I've seen too much of that fuckery, and you know, you're out working, and you know, our job is hard. And if you're a field collector, like I was, like you were, 20 to 30 hour days. And I know 30-hour days don't make sense to people, but I mean, yesterday finishes hours and hours into the next day. And then you eat a hot dog and you have a rip it, and then you go back out on the next patrol because the work is there, right?
When I deployed to Germany in 85 for a Reforger, we worked for literally 3 days. And I barely had any sleep. We came off the airplane and right into operations. And by the way, people understand it's like Reforger. It was an exercise, but we were doing real counterintelligence stuff to protect the troops because there were real threats. We actually had people being killed during that time. So when we go in, we're deploying to do our real world mission, not exercise. Although the exercise is going on around us, we are actually doing our real mission to protect the troops. Just saying. So
one of the times at Reforger, I think it was Reforger, BCTP, one of those things. They're like, hey, you counterintelligence guys, your play can't affect our play. So just do your own thing. And we're like, well, then why are we here? Because we didn't have a job to do the actual real world mission. And that is part of a thing, right? You show up to a unit, they have to understand, like this is for the audience. I know you know this, but there is one of the thinnest regulations in the entire military is the one where it allows counterintelligence agents to give money to people to obtain information. It is like 12 pages, right? And most of the pages are boilerplate. And so basically it says this: if you steal this money, you'll go to jail. That's what it says. But everybody wants to get their dick beaters on your report, know who your source is, and like, no. And they always want it like, they always want to get in between us and our work and tell us what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. And like, you don't even know what reg we're talking about. And then you grab that cat and you go grab the captain. You're like, hey, Captain, listen, I know you think you're helping me, but you're not. I'm going to do this anyhow, because ultimately you're my client, not my boss. And so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go do a great job for you if you let me do it and just don't get in my way operationally. Matter of fact, if you can get me out more, I can help you more. That's what you should be working on. Not if I'm giving some guy a $20, American dollar bill and not getting a receipt. I don't give a fuck about your receipt. What I care about is the information I'm getting, No,
it's funny because of the different standards. Like when we went to the farms, we were in CIA's financial system. And what they do to avoid that is like you get $20 a day of incidental cash. That's it. It's like you can use it. You can pay more than that, or you can pocket it. We don't care. This is what you get per day for operational expenses. That's it. It's very cut and dry. It's like you're going to get it. You can use it for what you want. Now our system is like, oh, you need to account for that. It's like stupid. It's like, no, this is stupid.
Yeah.
And then
by the way, the guy bugging me about accounting for it, not even worried about accounting. He's just saying you're not allowed to do it. And he's a CAV soldier. And I'm like, you're not even in the right branch to talk about this.
So, and then the other thing I did was we do have the ability to run what we call proprietaries, which are corporations. And one of the operations I was running, I had millions of dollars, both of resources and equipment that we were using as part of this proprietary. And so, as a matter of fact, we had it set up. I had my own financial officer, a finance core officer, a full staff. And I would go through an annual inspector general thing. So like, just put an IG inspector in with my unit. You can do real-time audits. I don't care.
Right.
But the idea was that we had millions of dollars which were being moved around for purposes of doing operations. And I was, I had no problem with that. As a matter of fact, one of the seniors, Tom Dillon. I don't know if you ever met Tom Dillon. Tom came out of Europe, and he was it's like, what's to stop you from running away with all this money? It's like, not a damn thing. I'm the guy in charge. It's my money. But I do plan on someday retiring and having a nice life that I don't have to worry about people looking over my shoulder, worrying about I'm being investigated. And I don't. But I'm just saying that, you got to have a certain level of trust. It's like people just have to go out and do what they need to do. Money is a tool that you use to obtain and retain information. It is what it is.
Yeah. It is what it is. And by the way, I've got the highest clearance to have. So someone trusts me to do something. So
exactly,
let me do my job, and I'll let you know if I need your help.
Exactly.
So there's so many of these things. So there's the internal within us, and we don't do well at communicating with one another. There's the tactical side, the stractical side, the strategic side, all of these things. And then also the recharacterization of what is counterintelligence. Like, oh, Pete, you're just a human turd. I'm like, well, first off, take the word just out, because anybody who goes out of the wire and collects is fucking incredible. That's not an easy or a gentle job. And by the way, why wouldn't that still be counterintelligence? Am I also not trying to defeat the enemy and looking for their thing? I don't have to necessarily find the other agent out there. That's not required within the job. But people struggle even with what it is that our job is. And that's partly because I know for me, I define what my job is. I know what I need to do to help the commander, and that's all counterintelligence work. That's what matters. You may not agree with me. I say the word spy because ultimately, if I get caught by the other side, what are they going to charge me with? Right? They're going to see me as that.
Well, of course. And look, there were bounties in our head in Afghanistan. There were significant bounties in our heads. We were captured, caught, or killed. So yes.
Yeah, I look when everybody got upset because Donald Trump linked that to him, and I'm like, where have you been, man? But one of my KPIs is when someone from the two shop comes running up, Pete, They know who you are because I always use my real name because I want to be the same person whoever encounters me, whether it's an American commander or a Bosnian farmer. They're going to meet the same dude, right? And
Yeah.
so I love it when they come up and tell me they know who I am and they've targeted me, and I'm like, that means I'm on the field. That means I've got.
Well, I can't. I don't
number
have that
and I'm
luxury since
playing.
I was in career cover. Yeah, since we in career cover
different
had to go on
jobs,
alias.
right?
Yeah. So,
But right, yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. We have different roles,
Yeah.
but for me, I could do that. One of the other things I could do that you probably couldn't do was, and it took me a long time to develop this, was if you were an influential Afghan or Iraqi guy and you were like an elder or a religious guy or a member of parliament, I would work with the local commander, American commander colonel, and I would say, hey, I'm going to bring on Sheikh Tony, and we're not going to search him. Matter of fact, your guys are
No,
going
we
to
did
stand
stuff
at
like that.
attention.
No, we did
salute.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it freaks people out when you say that. Like, you brought them on.
No. I mean, if we read Darkheart, there's a chapter where we have to bring a warlord into camp. He's going to be our ground guide for the assault.
Yeah.
And so what I didn't tell anybody is that we stuck him in CIA's area. It's like, oh, we're going to stick him over in OGA's billets.
Yeah.
They had no idea.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we had him in one of the CIA rooms. Like, don't ixnay on telling CIA that we got anything. But no, I mean, it's like, yeah, of course we did. It was great. And they never found out. Well, I guess they're finding out now.
If you treat them with respect, and I love to take them to the chow hall because I didn't realize this, but it blows their minds.
It
like,
does.
what do you mean ice cream? Really?
No, I had to give the guy part of my kit because I was there wearing stuff like this. But I had all the assault gig, so he was going on the air assault with the Rangers. I had to kit him up. Never got the stuff back, by the way. I'm just saying, but he had to look like the other guys going on the raid. I thought it was great, and I thought that was great rapport building too. Just saying. So.
When I think about my prime function, like my baseline, the thing I can do no matter where you send me, Pete, we're going to have you go pre-deploy out to fill in the country X, right, into city Y or whatever it's going to be, and we'll work on your orders later. First off, a lot of ambiguity in there, but that's our job, right? But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to network and build trust with people. Because if I have a network and I have trust, I'm wired in a way that I can do things that no one else can do. Those are my two default things. What would you say are your default things?
Well, I mean, the two default things that I've come to discover that over the years of doing this is that you have to understand that the universe is much more complicated than we believe. Things happen, and you have to have your instincts and your wits about you. There's nothing better, I think, than an operative who is zen. And let me explain what I mean by that. You point out, Pete, that you have to go out of the wire and you have to talk to people. You have to deal with leadership who don't necessarily support you, understand you, but you got to be zen about it. You got to be just kind of, what is the thing about you must be the water? You must be, you can't be in the water. You must be the water. Yeah. You need to let things flow through you. And God gave you good instincts. You need to use them. So I think that's one of the things I've relied upon effectively my entire career. And being zen, being open, listen to that little voice in the back of your head. Nothing suits that. And that goes both ways. And sometimes that means that little voice is screaming at you, but you got to do it anyway. Because doing that means you're going to have to take on some risk. And as I've look, I've been yelled at. I've been chewed out by the chairman of Joint Chiefs. I'm still right. Just saying, Joe, if you're listening. And I don't mind being chewed out as long as I know, but I'm still right. Sorry. So being instinctive, being zen, don't let them get under your skin is very important. Secondly, I think is being persistent. Again, it's related to the first one, but a little bit different. Being persistent means that if you know something and you're right, don't back off. You need to go do it. There's going to be consequences. I've actually talked about this. I do a lot of media. I'm a media guy now. And so I always tell people, just because you have free speech doesn't mean it's without consequences. But you must have the courage to suffer those consequences. One of my dearest friends just got fired recently for doing her job. Catherine Herridge over at CBS. Catherine got fired for doing her job, but she's committed. I've talked to her, by the way, and she's committed to the standards she established for herself. That's what I'm talking about. Many of the traits of good reporters and good intelligence officers are very similar. Just saying. So
salespeople too.
Yeah, maybe I can't sell anything, but I've tried. But anyway, so just.
But you're right, though. You do have to have that integrity so that you can lean on it. I made the ag team mad in one of the districts I was in, '06 once again, and wanted me out. And they were going to kick me out. But my boss had a giant ass. He's like, chew on it all you want. Pete's staying. And he's
Good.
like, we'll see about that. And so then the DCO comes running over. But for the audience, the DCO is the colonel's, the brigade commander's right hand man. And he's like, hey, Pete's gonna have to go, you know. And what it was we were writing about wheat seed distros, and I had done all of the important work. And he'd written all this thing assassinating this governor's character and everything else. And I'm like, unlike Colonel so-and-so, and the word unlike Colonel so-and-so, even though he had written publicly to all this mailing list in our world, I just came back and I hit him hard with all the actual facts.
Yeah.
And it offended him, and his ego got in the way. Look, I have an ego, but when we work, that Zen thing, that's like, hey, my ego's got to get set aside. My fear's got to get set aside. I've got to do something that might get me killed, right? But I've got to go do it. So my boss was able to say, I've heard everything you said, sir. You point to where Pete is wrong in his report. I'll send him home. And then the DCO looked at him and went, fuck, and then walked away. And Pete got back to work. And the colonel, the boss, loved me more than ever because he knew that I was going to give it to him straight. Now, sometimes in my world where I work, I've got to be dialed in because I'm granular with my focus. And sometimes like, hey, Pete, drag it that way. I need the commander to do that. But I don't need someone on the outside trying to kick me off the camp because I don't work with that dude. I work for the boss. And that's how that works.
So it's interesting you should mention the whole integrity thing and being essentially willing to work through the fear. I got a question on Saturday from someone. It's like, because they've followed me for a while. And and this person said, don't you ever feel fear? Because it's like this person thinks that I'm fearless, like all the time. Nobody is without fear. It's just you learn as a method of success. You need to set it aside. You can't let it affect you. You've got things to do. And everybody's afraid. Nobody, no matter how brave they are, is not afraid. It's just they've learned how to deal with it and be brave. And bravery often is simply waiting at last second before you get scared to do something and just doing it. So,
and when I get that question, it's the same thing. It's like you think about NFL players. Someone is going to get hurt in that game. Every single game, someone's going to get some kind of injury, and they play. They don't worry about the fear part of it. We're professionals at our level.
Right.
Is that for young rookie guys to be that way? No, they need to be guided by guys like us to go, this is how you deal with this fear. This is how you mitigate risk. But if a sheikh comes to me and says, Pete, I need you to go to my compound on my terms with my men. You're protected by me. I need to decide now, okay, how do I do this, right? Do I do it? Okay, let's just say in this case, I am going to do it. I have done it. Now I've got to go back to the Americans and say, and this is for the audience. There's a guy who's kind of like the captain of the ship of the unit for 12 hours. He's called the battle captain. And so I don't want to have battle captain not know I'm there, but I also don't want the battle captain to have to know that he knows that I'm going to be out in space. So I'll have a conversation with the battle captain that sounds like this. Hey, sir, sometimes some of the collectors in this unit have to go out outside of the normal confines of things because that's how they get the best information. And if they were to do something like that and only be protected by Afghan assets, would a guy like you want to know about that? Or would it be best to not let you know? And then he's like, in cases like this, I think the best thing is to have that person have a radio and not say a thing to me. But if you called in and I knew your call sign and you had a grid number, like then we could respond to almost anything. And so we have this conversation where we agree that I'm not going to tell him anything. And if I don't need his help, I'm not going to call him. And that's all going to work out. But that's all part of that dance of protection so that we can go out and do this dangerous thing. Because as soon as I rid myself of that platoon, of all those creatine-filled dudes, and I'm sitting and I'm having chai and the wife is serving me, you never get to see a wife in either the case. I have got so much trust now with this person. I can really do things that literally no one else out of the 10,000 of us that are there, no one else has that access. And that for the commander, it's as if I am that infantry lieutenant that says, follow me, except for no one's allowed to follow me, right? I'm doing the most brave thing I can. My well-being is no longer relevant in this case. I've created this opportunity. Again, I've assessed it as a professional and I've said, this is something I need to do. I've protected the people around me so that they're not going to get harmed by this action. Now I'm going to take it. But that is not, that is an advanced decision, an advanced thing, but fear is not part of the equation.
No, as a matter of fact, a derivative of what you said is I have to use an example from school rather than the real world, although it happened in the real world too.
Yeah.
But basically, we were going on final exercise down in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, by the way, is a great place to have final exercise. Just saying. I'd recognize, Pete, that sitting on the beach at the Ramada in San Juan, drinking pina coladas and writing contract reports, like, hey, this is going to be a pretty good profession. I think I can live with this. Anyway, just saying. I was doing well in my class at the farm. I thought I was going to skate to the graduation. They didn't do that. So I get thrown into an exercise. And by the way, as I've said, our exercises are just like real world. Nothing, you break roll, you're out. I mean, they literally, you break roll, you're done. That's the one thing.
Right.
If people are in a firefight around you, you stay in character no matter what, and you play it through no matter what. Anyway, we're doing, and so they throw me into this exercise, which I thought I was done. It's like, no, you have to do a developmental. From your training, you have to do a developmental approach. You have to develop the relationship. So I was doing this developmental operation, trying to recruit somebody, and I'd done the first meeting and figured out what the issues were. His motivations, his weaknesses, did all the assessment stuff. Go to the second meeting, develop him some more. Turns out the guy we think is a terrorist enabler. Oh, okay, this guy's a pretty important guy. So we go through and develop it, and then get all the information written up. And this is over a week. They're developing this over a week. And so I have to go to the third meeting, and I'm doing my brief to the OO, the operations officer. Mm-hmm. And he's telling me, basically, it's our CIA base contact, Pete. He's playing the role of the CIA guy. And Ray Schultz is his name. Ray, good guy, the Velvet Hammer, Ray. Anyway, so Ray is saying, no matter what, Tony, you do not have authorization to recruit him, because obviously you have to recruit a guy. In our job, you have to cross the line and identify yourself as U.S. intelligence. Anyway, so he went through and said 3 times during the briefing, you do not have authorization to recruit him. Put the recruitment request in, but don't recruit him. So there I go. I go out, meet the guy, and the guy's all nervous. He's giving off all the indications that something's really wrong. He tells me he's leaving the country. He's about to leave the country, and I'll never be able to see him again. So I decide this guy knows something. And what do? I break the rule. I recruit him on the spot. I take him out. Of course you did. Take him out on the pier, and I get everything out. So it turns out, to that point, do you know what the outcome was of my doing this for my class?
I called indexed and got and put.
No, I said,
Tony's the greatest.
I recruited the guy. It turned out it was the right answer, and I ended up as honor graduate of the class because I broke the rule. Yeah. That was the point. Yeah. The point was, as it turned out, don't listen to us. If we tell you something and you're out there on the spot, you know what's going on. You have to make that hard call, and that's a lesson I use a lot. It's like, no, your job as an intelligence officer. If we tell you instructions, which by the time you have to implement them are wrong, you have to make the call. So anyway, I ended up being, I think I was the youngest in my class at the farm. And again, I made the right call thinking I was going to get fired. So there you go. So.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the lessons I learned at CIFSO after running sources. I went and I taught people how to run sources, and it was like a dumb luck by the Army that I was there, way too young in rank and everything else. But I got curtailed because my newly wed wife from the Army, her assignment took me to Huachuca. And so I was able to see everybody else's judo, hiya. And look, I was nascent. At looking back, I thought I was pretty hot shit because I'd done stuff, and I was. But where I got to was a completely different realm. And it's when you do have guys like us that are there long enough, on the ground long enough, you don't graduate away and lose all contact with it. You do start to develop things that are outside of the books. And one of the things I would say is, like, we're taught placement, access, spot, assess, recruit. Okay. But in the modern combat that I was in, I was the placement and access. I could create that because I was building the network. And if I made friends with the general, if I made friends with the religious guy, I now had the access. That's not what the book says. But in my world, that was where I had to go because I couldn't reliably work with someone like that because just that pattern, it wouldn't work. And so I realized I have to be the placement and access. And so that breaks a rule. However, no one's had to work in that environment like I did in that tactical, dangerous environment. So I don't know what your thoughts are on those kind of things, but we are rewriting things, but only if the system recognizes that excellence and brings us in to teach people. I can't even get on to Fort Huachuca. Like I have to ask someone's permission, you know?
So this is a love-hate thing. It's by the way, my book, Operation Dark Heart, used to be actually sold in clothing sales because some people recognized it. I found out later it's because one of the Army War College commandants who I was in combat with actually said, you need to put it in clothing sales. But some hate it because I'm very honest and direct about the knuckleheadery I observe. It's like, this is stupidity. So it's a mixed bag. But so the answer is, until the system breaks down and fails completely, it's not going to change. And I've seen this over and over, Pete. So I think that's
the best system that we have.
Yeah, I think it'll change eventually. I mean, people like you now will come back in, but it's got to really suffer before that happens, unfortunately.
Yeah. But the thought of changing the rules so dramatically, like, hey, I am the placement and access because I'm the guy that's most reliable for this thing. What are your thoughts on, and not necessarily that technique, but when you get something that we've all been taught, like this is how this is, this is how this is, this is how this is, and you realize that the book, in your case, in your in your experience where you're deployed, is not even close to right. Matter of fact, it's opposite. That is a bold call because your career is on the line. You and I weren't necessarily worried about careers, but I don't blame anybody that is.
Well, I believed, like, maybe I watched too much Man from U.N.C.L.E. or X-Files or whatever during the day. It's like, you just got to figure out what you got to do and do it. I mean, I think that there were a number of things that we all had as influences growing up that affected our thinking. And I was one of those guys that always thought, you need to go do the job and figure it out. And if that means breaking some eggs, then you do it. And if that means sacrificing your career, you sacrifice it. So, I know other people who have, careers that they want to protect. God bless them. And I don't blame them. The people have, but I just was not one of them. And, one of my ex-wives was very upset about it. She felt, well, you brought all this on. It's like, I don't think so, but you can believe that. So, it is what it is.
Well, look, I've had you for an hour, and everybody definitely
should
get Operation Dark Heart. So their links are down below. Thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Let's do it again soon.
We could talk for another hour if left to our own devices,
Yeah, no, we will. We'll get together and we'll do it. We'll do one of our drinks. But again, unless you have anything else to close with me with, I'm going to kick you out because I know you're busy.
Great. No, Pete, well, I thank you, and I appreciate your audience being here to hear this. I look forward to telling more war stories. I think people will learn some stuff, and I think we need to do what we can to help find a way to mentor those who are currently doing the job you and I did back in the day, because I can tell you they're having a hard time doing it because there's so many politically correct things settled atop of them right now that I know I didn't have initially, and I know you had to face a little bit more than I did. But
sure. All right, man, I'm going to run this. If you don't need to stay, don't
take
stay.
care. See you all soon.
And I'll see you. Yep.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much for watching the Break It Down.